I'm Lisa, a 42-year-old economist. My life is a series of routines and solitude, quite the opposite of my best friend Julia's vibrant social whirl. She's always been the outgoing one, unlike me, who's always shied away from the limelight. Julia's married to a businessman, Robert, and they're quite the social butterflies, hosting parties and gatherings, a scene I usually avoid. One evening, while I was settling in with a book, my phone rang, breaking the silence of my apartment. It was Julia, her voice full of excitement. "Lisa, you have to come to our party next weekend," she blurted out as soon as I answered. I hesitated, feeling the familiar twinge of social anxiety. "Oh, Julia, you know I'm not one for parties," I replied, hoping she'd let it go. But Julia wasn't one to give up easily. "Come on, Lisa, it'll be fun. Plus, there's someone I really want you to meet," she insisted, a hint of mystery in her voice. Despite my reluctance, Julia's enthusiasm was infectious. Okay, I'll come. But I'm not staying late," I conceded, already dreading it. "You're going to love it, I promise," Julia said before ending the call. The night of the party, I found myself standing awkwardly in a corner of Julia's lavish living room, clutching a glass of wine for comfort. The room buzzed with laughter and chatter, a stark contrast to my quiet corner. As I was planning my escape, I bumped into a man as I turned around. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there," he apologized with a warm smile. "No, it's my fault. I tend to blend into the background," I said, offering a small smile in return. He extended his hand. "I'm Michael. And you are?" "Lisa," I replied, shaking his hand. "A friend of Julia's." "Small world, I'm here thanks to Robert," Michael said, his easy manner making me feel slightly more at ease. We started talking, and surprisingly, I found myself enjoying the conversation. Michael was a preacher with a TV presence, a fact that intrigued me. He spoke of his son, Chris, who lived with him, and I shared a bit about my work and love for quiet evenings. The days following Julia's party were filled with a new, unfamiliar excitement. Michael and I had exchanged numbers that evening, and to my surprise, he called the next day. His voice over the phone was just as warm and inviting as it had been in person. "Hi Lisa, it's Michael. I really enjoyed our talk at the party. Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" he asked. I hesitated, not used to such attention, but the memory of our pleasant conversation prompted me to accept. "Sure, coffee sounds nice," I replied, a hint of nervousness in my voice. We met at a quaint cafe downtown, a place far removed from the bustling atmosphere of the party. Sitting across from Michael, I found myself opening up about my life and work, something I rarely did with someone I had just met. "So, what's it like being an economist?" Michael asked, his eyes showing genuine interest. "It's mostly numbers and analysis. Not as exciting as preaching to a crowd, I'm sure," I responded, feeling a bit self-conscious. He chuckled softly. "Well, each to their own. I find solace in sharing words of faith, but we all have our paths." As we talked, I learned more about his life as a preacher and his son, Chris. "He's at university now. It's just me at home. It gets quiet, you know," he shared. I nodded, understanding the feeling all too well. "I can imagine. I've always valued my quiet space, but it can get lonely." Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and before we knew it, a couple of hours had passed. As we parted ways, Michael said, "I'd really like to see you again, Lisa. You're easy to talk to." Flattered and a bit taken aback, I agreed to meet again. Over the next few weeks, our casual meetups became a regular occurrence. We shared stories, laughed, and slowly, a connection formed, one I hadn't experienced before. It was during one of these meetings that Michael broached the subject of his son, Chris. "I worry that he might not take well to me seeing someone. He's quite protective since his mother passed," he admitted. I felt a twinge of anxiety at the thought. "I understand. It must be hard for him, I said, wondering how I would fit into their lives. To my relief, when I eventually met Chris, our introduction went smoother than I had anticipated. He was polite and friendly, and to my delight, we found common ground in our love of books. The relationship with Michael blossomed into something beautiful and unexpected. It was a whirlwind of emotions, and before I knew it, Michael proposed. It was a simple yet heartfelt moment, one that marked a new beginning for both of us. Marriage was never something I had actively sought, considering my reserved nature and preference for solitude. Yet, with Michael, it felt right. His kindness, warmth, and the connection we shared made me believe in the possibility of a shared life. The months following Michael's proposal were like a dream. I, Lisa, who had always cherished my solitude, found myself eagerly diving into this new chapter of life. Our wedding was a modest but beautiful affair, attended by close friends and family, including Julia, who seemed genuinely happy for me. One evening, a few weeks after the wedding, as Michael and I sat on our porch, I shared my thoughts. I never imagined I would be here, in this moment, married and so content, I said, looking out at the starlit sky. Michael took my hand, his voice soft with affection. Life is full of surprises, Lisa. I'm just glad that this surprise brought you into my life. As a preacher's wife, I found myself attending various church events and social gatherings, a stark contrast to my previous lifestyle. At first, it was overwhelming, but Michael was always by my side, his presence a comforting constant. One Sunday after his sermon, as people mingled around the church hall, I overheard snippets of conversation praising Michael's eloquence. Your husband has a way with words. You must be so proud, one of the churchgoers commented as she passed by me. I smiled, feeling a sense of pride. Yes, I am. Thank you. Life with Michael was filled with small, joyful moments. We often hosted dinners where Michael's charm and charisma shone. Julia and Robert were frequent guests, and Julia would often pull me aside, gushing about how happy she was for me. You've really come out of your shell, Lisa. Michael's been so good for you, Julia remarked one evening as we set the table for a dinner party. I laughed softly. I guess love does change people. I'm just glad it changed me for the better. However, with Chris heading off to university, the house felt emptier, and I sensed a subtle change in Michael. He seemed more distant, lost in thought, and our conversations, once filled with laughter and shared stories, now often lapsed into silence. One night, as we sat quietly in the living room, I tried to breach the growing gap. Is everything okay, Michael? You seem different, I asked, concerned. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting a complexity of emotions. It's just the house feeling empty without Chris, and the church demands. Don't worry, Lisa, we'll adjust. I wanted to believe him, to believe that this was just a phase and that we would soon return to our blissful, loving days. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts, fears that this change might be the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. The subtle changes in Michael that I had initially dismissed as mere adjustments to our new life together began to evolve into something more concerning. After Chris left for university, the house, once filled with his youthful energy, grew quiet, almost somber. Michael's demeanor changed, the warmth and affection he used to show me seemed to diminish, replaced by an irritable and distant attitude. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Michael walked into the kitchen. I noticed his furrowed brow and tense expression. Is everything all right, Michael? I asked tentatively. He glanced at the stove and then back at me, his voice sharp. Why isn't dinner ready yet? I'm tired of waiting every evening. Taken aback by his tone, I replied, I'm sorry, the roast is taking longer than I expected. It's always something, isn't it? He retorted before walking away. I stood there, stirring the pot, feeling a mix of confusion and sadness. This wasn't the Michael I knew, the man who used to appreciate my cooking and the effort I put into our home. As days turned into weeks, these instances became more frequent. Michael's criticisms grew harsher, and his patience shorter. There were times when he would come home late, and if dinner wasn't hot, he would react angrily. One such night, When dinner had gone cold, Michael's reaction was more intense than usual. "This is unacceptable, Lisa. If I come home, I expect a hot meal," he scolded, his voice raised. "But Michael, you didn't tell me you'd be late." "I can warm it up," I suggested, trying to keep my voice calm. "No, I want a freshly cooked meal." "Is that too much to ask?" he snapped, his demeanor intimidating. I felt a lump form in my throat as I watched him discard the meal I had spent hours preparing. I nodded silently, holding back tears, and began to prepare another dish. As the nights grew longer and lonelier, with Michael often staying out late, I found myself missing the man I had married. The man who preached about love and kindness seemed to be a different person behind closed doors. As the days passed, my life with Michael descended further into a pattern of isolation and despair. The man I had married, who had once been my source of joy and companionship, now seemed like a distant, cold stranger. His once warm and affectionate nature was replaced by a harsh and critical demeanor, leaving me feeling alone and trapped in a loveless marriage. One evening, as Michael returned home late again, I nervously waited for him with dinner ready, hoping it would be to his liking. The moment he entered, I could sense his discontent. "This is what's for dinner?" "It's practically the same as last night," Michael remarked, a tone of annoyance in his voice. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I thought you liked this dish, Michael. I can make something else if you want." "No, just leave it. I'm not in the mood for your cooking tonight," he said dismissively, walking away from the table. I stood there in the kitchen, the untouched plates of food in front of me, fighting back tears. The loneliness and despair were overwhelming, and I longed for someone to talk to. I picked up the phone and called Julia, hoping for some comfort. "Julia, it's Lisa. I don't know what to do anymore. Michael is so different now. He doesn't even eat the meals I prepare," I shared, my voice trembling. "Oh, Lisa, you're probably just overthinking things. Michael's a good man. Maybe you're just not used to being married yet," Julia responded, her tone lacking the empathy I desperately needed. "But he's hardly ever home, and when he is, all he does is criticize me." "It feels like he doesn't care at all," I said, hoping she would understand the gravity of my situation. "Lisa, marriage is about compromise. Maybe try talking to him, see what's bothering him." "I'm sure it's nothing serious," Julia suggested, not fully grasping the depth of my unhappiness. I hung up the phone, feeling more isolated than ever. Julia, whom I had always counted on, couldn't see the pain I was in. It seemed like I had no one to turn to, no one who understood. I started to question my own judgment, wondering if this was all my fault, if there was something I could have done differently to prevent Michael's transformation. But deep down, I knew I had done everything I could. The problem wasn't with me, it was with the man who had vowed to love and cherish me but now treated me like a stranger in my own home. The transformation in my home was stark and disheartening. Michael, once a source of comfort and joy, had become a stranger, his demeanor increasingly marred by late-night drinking and unpredictable outbursts. It was a gradual shift, one that I had tried to deny at first, but the evidence was becoming too overwhelming to ignore. One fateful evening, the air in our home was charged with an uneasy tension. Michael had returned later than usual, the effects of his drinking evident in his staggered walk and slurred words. I had learned to tread lightly on these nights, but nothing could have prepared me for what was to come. As I placed dinner on the table, an attempt to inject some normalcy into the evening, Michael's frustration boiled over. "This again? Can't you make anything else?" he slurred, his voice dripping with disdain. Attempting to maintain a semblance of calm, I replied, "I thought this was your favorite, Michael. I can make something else if you prefer." In a sudden fit of rage, Michael flung his phone in my direction. I stumbled backward, the phone narrowly missing me, but in my retreat, I knocked over the dinner spread, sending plates and food crashing to the floor. He let out a scornful laugh. "Look at the mess you've made. Clean it up," he commanded before staggering off to the bedroom, leaving me alone in the wreckage. Tears welled in my eyes as I began to pick up the pieces. That's when I noticed Michael's phone, lying amidst the mess, unlocked and unguarded. A part of me knew that crossing that boundary could change everything, but the need for truth, for some understanding of Michael's change, compelled me forward. I picked up the phone and there it was, a string of messages between Michael and Julia. "Can't wait to see you again, missing you, Lisa suspects nothing," the words blurred as tears welled up in my eyes. The betrayal was twofold. My husband and my best friend, two people I had trusted implicitly, were stabbing me in the back. My heart sank as I read each line, a mix of affectionate exchanges and plans for secret rendezvous. I sat there, amidst the chaos, the phone in my hand a testament to their betrayal. Feelings of hurt, anger, and disbelief swirled within me. How could they do this to me? How long had this deception been going on right under my nose? In that moment, I decided to keep this revelation to myself. I needed time to process this betrayal and to plan my next steps carefully. This knowledge was a weapon, and I needed to wield it wisely. I cleaned up the kitchen, my mind racing with the implications of what I had just discovered. The man I had loved and the friend I had trusted had both deceived me in the most intimate way possible. Sleep eluded me that night as I lay in bed, the truth gnawing at me. The next day was a blur, my interactions with Michael mechanical and devoid of emotion. He seemed oblivious to the storm raging inside me, a storm fueled by his own duplicity. Several days after the revelation of Michael's affair, the atmosphere at home had become unbearable. His late-night arrivals and the palpable tension between us escalated into frequent verbal attacks. I knew I couldn't endure this any longer, it was time to take a stand. One evening, as Michael launched into another tirade over some trivial matter, I interrupted him, a newfound resolve in my voice. "Enough, Michael. I can't do this anymore," I said firmly, holding out an envelope. "These are divorce papers." Michael stopped mid-sentence, his anger giving way to shock. "Divorce? Are you serious, Lisa?" "Yes, I am," I replied, my voice unwavering. "I know about your affair with Julia. I'm not going to hide it anymore. It's over." Michael's demeanor changed from shock to desperation. "Lisa, please, think about this. You can't do this to me. It will ruin my career as a preacher. My reputation will be destroyed." "I've thought about it plenty, Michael. Your career and reputation are no longer my concern. I deserve better than this," I stated, my tone resolute. He began to beg, his voice tinged with panic. "Lisa, I'm begging you. Please don't do this. We can work this out." "No, Michael. There's nothing left to work out. You broke our vows, and I won't stay in a marriage built on lies," I responded, my decision clear. Michael's face contorted with anger, his voice rising. "Fine. Go ahead with your divorce. But remember, you won't get a cent from me. I'll make sure you're left with nothing, out on the streets." As I stood there, absorbing his harsh words, he delivered a final, cruel blow. "You're just a fool, Lisa. Just as stupid as my dead wife." At that moment, the door opened, and Chris, Michael's son, stepped into the room. I didn't tell my husband that I invited my stepson to stay for a few days. The moment Chris stepped into the room, the dynamic shifted dramatically. His face was a mask of shock and anger, a stark contrast to his father's blustering fury. "What did you just say about Mom?" Chris demanded, his voice quivering with rage. Michael, caught off guard by his son's sudden appearance, tried to regain his composure. "Chris, this is not what it looks like. We were just..." "Save it, Dad." "I heard everything." Chris cut him off, his eyes burning with anger. "How could you say such things? About Mom, about Lisa?" I stood there, watching the confrontation unfold, my heart pounding. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of all the pain and betrayal. "Chris, you don't understand. It's complicated," Michael attempted to explain, his voice faltering. "Complicated? You're cheating on Lisa, and you insult her and Mom in the same breath. What's complicated about that?" Chris shot back. Michael's face was a mixture of frustration and defeat. He looked at me, then at Chris, realizing that his usual tactics weren't going to work this time. Chris, listen to me. Your stepmother is exaggerating things. She's trying to turn you against me, Michael said, attempting to regain control. I'm not a kid anymore, Dad. I can see what's happening, Chris replied firmly. You've hurt Lisa enough. She doesn't deserve this. Turning to me, Chris's expression softened. Lisa, I'm so sorry. I had no idea things were this bad. I nodded, grateful for his support. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you standing up for me. Michael, now realizing the gravity of the situation, began to backtrack. Chris, please. Let's talk about this. We can sort things out. Chris shook his head. No, Dad. There's nothing left to sort out. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. He then dropped a bombshell that neither Michael nor I saw coming. And as for the house and the money, they're actually mine. Mom left them to me. So, you can't kick Lisa out or leave her with nothing. Michael's face went pale, the realization of his son's words sinking in. He was at a loss for words, the tables turned completely. I looked at Michael, then at Chris, feeling a mix of relief and empowerment. The truth was out, and I no longer had to bear the burden alone. Michael, it's over. I'm leaving, and I'm taking the steps to start my life over, without you, I said, my voice steady and resolute. What happened next? Michael's career as a preacher was ruined. Julia tried to make peace with me, but her tears didn't touch me anymore. She is now in the process of divorcing her husband, who is determined to leave her penniless. The path ahead was uncertain and undoubtedly challenging, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had found my voice and my strength, and with Chris's support, I knew I could overcome the trials ahead.